Right, we are live. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dutta Roy, and I welcome you all to the discussion series on working women in history, curated under TMYS Review June 2025, which is the first of the four projects themed on four distinct lenses to observe and understand the personal and social spheres of working women. We are calling for submissions of essays, poems, and short stories under the project. To know more about our submission guidelines and project architecture, please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz. The topic for today is Female Rage Inspiring Social Revolution. I consider myself extremely privileged to be in the company of our esteemed panelists, Mr. K. Hari Kumar, Ms. Rhea Singh Devdhar, and Professor Asmi Basu, who will shortly share their insights with us. Without further ado, then, I'd like to introduce the speakers. Our first speaker for the session is Mr. K. Hari Kumar. Mr. Kumar is an author, screenwriter, and filmmaker known for blending Indian folklore, spirituality, and regional mythology into his work. He has written 8 books, including the bestsellers India's Most Haunted, Devdhar, and Dakini. He has also contributed screenplays to three notable screen projects, including the acclaimed Hindi web series Bhram. We are delighted to have you with us, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Our second speaker for the session is Ms. Rhea Singh Devdhar. Ms. Devdhar is a corporate litigation lawyer, primarily working in Chandigarh. She writes short stories with a bent on themes of feminist struggles and victory. She believes in reinventing herself while retreating to the Himalayas for every new season. Apart from these, she also likes to delve into history and psychology. We're delighted to have you with us, ma'am. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Our last speaker for the evening is Professor Asmi Basu. Professor Basu identifies as a motherhood studies scholar. She is the founder of Gender Benders, a Kolkata based organization that works towards creating gender sensitivity in various academic and non academic institutions. She works as an assistant professor of English at the Nabundu Andrews Institute of Technology and Management. Her interest lies in women's studies, maternal studies, poetry, and creative writing. We're delighted to have you with us, ma'am. Thank you for joining.
I'm so happy to be here.
Moving on, we will now open the forum for discussion. I would like to request Mr. Kumar to share his insights with us first. Over to you, sir.
I'm sorry, what?
Uh, I'd like to invite you to share your perspectives and insight on the topic first. Over to you.
I think I come from a very different perspective altogether because I am not a woman, I'm a man. So it's mostly observation, it's not personal experience which brings me here, right? And when I say observation, it's observing the women in my life, my mother, my wife, friends. So I think I'm more eager to hear what the others are going to tell me here, right? But at the same time, the thing is, whatever works I've done, the body of works, be it the books that I've written, or the films or screenplays that I've written, it has always been female oriented. The protagonist has always been a woman. Why is that? Probably because my life has been shaped by women. So I think so. That's why. So yes, female age is part of the narrative. It has been a part of the narrative in the last 3 or 4 works, including the last 2 books that I've written, Dakma and Dakini, including the web series that I wrote, Brahm, and also the film that I'm writing right now, a Malayalam film. It all revolves around female rage. Somehow it comes back to that. So yeah, I'm very much interested to hear what the others in the band are, about to talk about.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Devdar, if you could share your insights on the topic.
So I so I'm really glad that you said that you would want to hear from us first because it makes a lot of sense that ways. It's lovely when men recognize that our struggles are very personal. So when I understand female rage, I see it as something akin to a volcanic eruption. Why would I say that? It's because it takes a very long time to cook up. So it's a very long drawn build up with a lot of ascending pressure which is held back due to environmental gravities. We can, relate that with the society until it becomes so poisonous and disastrous to hold it that, the earth has to spew it out, like how women spew it out. So just like what feminine rage would be. It of course has its softer modes, its passive aggressive behavior or an air of disgruntlement. Sourabhi, I also attended one of your previous panel discussions where Anirban Bhattacharya and Jane Borges were discussing about the mysterious femme fatale, right? So today I'll try and link the two. Femme fatale, according to me, is someone whose feminine rage has taken over to such a degree that she's lived with it for so long that now she's understood how to maneuver it, how to make it a gain instead of a bane. Now, further, I'll say that female rage has been unconsciously already been a part of our culture for a very long time. We speak of the war cries of Jai Bhavani and Jai Kali. These war cries are considered those that bring out the feriness within the armies before you go for a war. So why do we do that? It's because a female's anger is considered much greater than that of her male counterpart, irrespective of the species. There is a general consensus that the female's anger has been slowly cooked to the brim. It's flanked with long periods of suffering and submission for it to burst out, thereby making her attacks more lethal. Now, this is all a very literary, fascinating, writer's narration aspect of things. As a lawyer, I will speak about the practical aspects. From my general observation in cases, even if a woman were a victim of, say, domestic violence or promise to marry, exploitation, if after the crime there appear to be many records evidencing that this woman is prone to anger and outbursts, somewhere or the other, the courts and authorities have an equally lenient attitude towards the perpetrator. When the very same rage that we are speaking of here is given the instrument of, say, a verbal disagreement in public by a woman in normal settings, it is scorned upon. The woman is called arrogant or as somebody who's forgetting her own place. So I just took the reference of goddess Kali. I'll also speak of Kali, Draupadi, or even take Sarpanakha, Ravan's sister, for example. I had been reading the Ramayana and I always felt that Sarpanakha has just been seen as a villain. Like, her nose was chopped off. So these are all women who seem to have little control over their anger, wherein the events that caused their outbursts, the reasons because of which they got angry, they're just given a backseat and the entire story edges on their reaction, then that then become the basic premise on which the entire greater doom and catastrophes are themed upon. So basically a woman's anger is then made the main choice of blame, that this is why everything happened. So I think we also have always heard of this saying that Mahabharat ka yudh ek aurat ki wajah se hua tha, which is just because of one woman that the entire war happened. So again, we are very cleverly using female rage as an icing on a cake to carpet an entire rotting cake wherein we are hiding the men's acts and the thousands of male stakeholders acts in question. So, men in anger, they always have been given a lighter hand for their outbursts, that their reactions were the only option that was available to them.
It's normal, yeah.
Yeah, that he had no choice but to slap him. He had no choice but to act in anger, whereas a woman would always be told that you could have had a softer means to go about it. That, say, Draupadi or Sarpanakha, their reactions to clearly humiliating and insulting situations, that an entire debacle is colored in antagonistic undertones of an inadequateness to take control of themselves without needing outer intervention, that they need a man to come and stop that anger. Ma Kali had to have Lord Shiva to intervene in the most absurd manner. So, this entire narrative, I think, this is what we see female rage as. It's highly misunderstood, and I would like to speak more about it as we go ahead. Yeah, I would want to ask me to speak.
Right,
May I
thank
just
you.
add something here? I mean,
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah,
sure.
that is
absolutely.
absolutely correct. Men's anger, it's always justified. Women's anger has to be justified. I think that's how it works. And again,
Yes,
it's not
yes,
just anger when it comes to female race. There's a lot of pent up emotion. It's not just uh, emotions from your or my lifetime. It's from a lot of generations. So yeah, please.
All right, thank you, sir. Moving on, Professor Basu, if you'd like to share your insights on the topic with us.
Um, just Asmi would be fine. That's just absolutely all right. But the first thing that I would like to say is thank you for actually creating the space to have a conversation about this because it's so important. I will start in the same way that at times have certain conversations with my students, with my friends. There's this very interesting thing called socialization, and I think the narrative that Rhea, can I call you Rhea? Is
Yeah,
that
absolutely,
okay?
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. That Ria was talking about that, this is how the narrative goes. That is how the narrative goes. This is how a woman is supposed to be. That's how an anger or an emotion of a woman is taken to be madness or destructive, etc., etc. So there's this very legendary feminist thinker called Helen Sisu who said that the world is divided into this very interesting binary. She called it the patriarchal binary thought. And she said that, the binary is not the issue. The issue is very, very like patriarchy and the entire way that things are governed on the basis of sexism. The left hand side of this binary, it is all the male attributes. And the right hand side, all of it, they are to construct an ideal female. So, on the left hand side, we have activity, or the right hand side, we will have passivity. On the left hand side, we have culture. On the right hand side, we have nurture. On the left hand side, we have rationality. And on the right hand side, we have emotion. Now, the binary in itself is not the problem. The problem is that in the patriarchal scheme of things, the left hand side is loaded with a positive value. That is, it's more profitable or it's more significant to be the leader than the follower. It's more important to be rational than to be emotional. And all the feminine virtues are somehow less significant, sometimes inferior, sometimes even negative. So what happens when socialization happens, and we aid in the process of a person becoming an ideal woman and an ideal man, we somehow follow this patriarchal binary thought, and there are certain things that are expected of women, and rage, angry outbursts, even a woman who is very voiceful, you know someone who will refute and rebuff and not be ashamed of it and not self-doubt. In that case, she is a problem, she's an anomaly. And anger, rage is always you know in very uncomfortable space, an uncomfortable aspect, if it is found in a woman. So what is so interesting is that the same anger, as I think Ria was saying a bit a while ago, that the same anger becomes like a signature masculine trait. In Bangla, people say, "Bata chile to matha gorom hobi." Like say, if I just translate it, that if it's real man, then of course anger. I mean, he's bound to be angry. I mean, it's just an expression of masculinity. On the flip side, men who express anger in a different way, in a softer way, and are not so voiceful, are not so out in the face, they have this question mark hanging around their masculinity and how manly they are. Now, what happens when this anger comes out? The most common association of an angry woman is to some sort of lunacy. We have all heard of the mad woman in the attic thing. Okay, she's so unstable. She is all over the place. But then it's so it's so incredible when we look at what this anger can transition to. If you look at Me Too, after the recent horrific Archikor incident in Kolkata, we had the Raat Dokhul movement, where women were out in the streets and they were occupying streets and they were trying to occupy the spaces that are not allowed for them to occupy at a certain hour. All of these have come from anger, have come from a certain space. When you direct rage in the right way, the rage can transcend and, you know, give you certain spaces for you to claim back. Uh, I think we can like continue the discussion from now, or should I go on speaking? I mean, I
You
can
please
because
go
I'm
on
an angry
speaking.
woman. I'm an angry woman, so I can. But I think we all can just come up with more. What do you think?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so would you want to speak or should I?
Uh,
Would you like to add something?
please, please. No, no, no.
Yeah.
Rhea, please go ahead.
So, ma'am, like, is it fine if I call you ma'am or should I call you something else?
Just call me Asmi. It's more than
All right.
enough. Thank you.
So, so Asmi, as you said that, there's a certain trait of lunacy that is assigned to a woman. And whereas if a man does the same things, it's just like considered normal. Now I'll give you an example of a case wherein there was this person. He was in a relationship with someone for a very long time. The families knew each other. Everyone knew everyone. And after 6 years, she breaks up with him, saying that she would want to marry a financially better prospect. And then it's already caused a lot of humiliation to him, and it's very embarrassing. Thereafter, she also sort of, leaks his intimate nude pictures in their peers, causing much humiliation that the man has to leave the city and live outside for like a long time, for 10 years or something. Then he comes back and he calls her and publicly stabs her in a park. So, in such a case, I think what would you feel that does the man have like a ground for him to have felt all of that? He had a lot of pent up sufferings, right? Like my peers said that he had a lot of suffering, so maybe this should be seen a bit leniently. There's so many cases like that. There's so many such thwarted lovers who have stabbed their female lovers and now they're scot free. So, adding to that, there was a case, you just reverse the genders here. That man was actually a woman called Kalyani Singh, and the man who was murdered was Sippy Sidhu. So this is a very popular case, especially in this area to this day, the Punjab area, this belt, wherein the man is celebrated. He not exactly celebrated, but he's seen as a very pious figure who was murdered for no reason, killed in his youth, and the woman has been suffering behind. She's in custody. She's not exactly been convicted. It's going on since a very long time. It's been going on for 10 years. So nobody could understand why she did that or whatever she did that. So therefore, they assigned a certain aspect of lunacy to her. Further, I also speak on battered wife syndrome. I'll speak on it later, but that's also very interesting take. I'm very happy that you brought up the aspect of lunacy here.
Yeah, I mean, call a woman mad is, it's like the first thing that is hurled. The moment I'll tell you something, I'm not a foreigner to rage, to anger. I am a daughter of a very, very angry father and a very soft mother. But I'll tell you, one of my first feelings of rage. And so I was used to traveling, uh, uh, by myself from a very young age. I was in class 5 or 6. I used to travel in a bus, not a school bus, normal public transport. And my stories and regular encounters of proper harassment and molestation, and I think even when like today's time I ask my students that how many of you have been who are traveling via public vehicles, how many of you have been touched in the wrong way, made to feel insecure, etc., even in broad daylight. I see almost say out of 10, at least 7 hands going up. Okay, so not much of a change there. So now I remember I was in class five. I was sitting in a bus, and there was a man who was constantly fondling me, sitting either constantly on my shoulder and other spaces, and I took it for about 30 minutes. Shrugging my shoulders, this and that, and then at one point I couldn't take it anymore, and I just got up and I collared him and I said, I didn't even know abuses back then. I was very, very young. And I just said whatever came to my head, something like, how dare you do this? You're doing something. And I will tell you, it was probably 2000s, and the entire bus full of people, middle class, probably educated, I don't know. No one said a word. But but that didn't put me down. I kept on shouting and shouting and shouting. And there was something that was happening inside me, like I felt my bones would melt. I was so, I was fuming inside. And I feel the same rage for myself and for others. So for me, my rage has been very, very productive. My rage is something that has pushed me to have the most difficult conversations when I take sessions in my organization called Gender Benders. And I come across extremely adamant people who kind of say, you're talking about homosexuality, and why are you doing that, etc. What is the need for it? And you're talking about mobility and freedom of women, and we have already won all of that. What is the need for it, etc. I keep on hearing this, but I'll tell you, um, my rage helps me. My rage helps me write. My rage helps me think. My rage helps me, you know, look forward to a better day. I don't think it's coming anytime soon, but yeah, it kind of keeps pushing me. It doesn't let me rest. So for me, my rage definitely is more productive than what it is usually thought of to be. Yeah, that's me.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. You said something very important about your rage being productive. We'll get to that in a while. Meanwhile, my first question is for Mr. Kumar. Your stories often revolve around intense emotions like fear and anger. So, how do you see female rage, particularly in the horror genre, serving as a tool for empowerment rather than mere narrative shock value? And how would you say that as a male ally, you can contribute to female rage in ways that are respectful and supportive rather than perhaps dismissive or patronizing?
So, like I mentioned earlier, female rage is not simply anger. When I'm talking about female rage, I'm talking about the character in my books or in my films. Okay. So again, it's not just simply anger. It's a multifaceted emotion that carries pain, frustration, defiance, and then because you have an arc in the story, there's a desire for change, some kind of a transformation. And when it comes to narratives about suppressed women, then you're also looking at not just like I mentioned earlier, it's not just this character suppression, it comes from years, centuries, and centuries of suppression, right? And marginalization. And horror at its core often deals with these repressed emotions and unspoken truths. And female rage, when given voice in such narratives, it becomes a powerful tool of catharsis and resistance for the character. And if the book or the film works, it can bring that. I mean, Asmi, you mentioned you're not happy. You can't be happy, at least not in this life. I don't know. I mean, but it can bring some kind of a change, and that change will come through this productive rage, or as long as it's not too destructive. Again, like a film like a Stree or a Bulbul, I'm talking about Hindi films here, they portray the female rage in a very dignified manner, and it has, I mean, to some extent brought some kind of a change in the way, at least the way the audiences were looking at it, right? But again, when it comes to my stories, I believe that this female rage, because that's how my climaxes are, there is some kind of an explosion. But it's not just destructive, it's revelatory. And why is it revelatory? Because it strips away the layers of societal norms and expectations. And then there is just this raw truth of existence, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all existences. If you tear apart everything else, the conditioning, the male, female, the whatever gender is there, biological or whatever, at the end of the day, we're all existing, and that's the only truth in our lives, right? So when a
Yeah.
woman in a horror narrative embraces her anger, she's no longer the victim of the story. She becomes the wielder of its power, the one who confronts and dismantles the systems that wrong. At least that's the way my stories have worked. Again, if you have not read it, then I'm just giving away what happens in the end. And as for the male allies, I believe their role is to listen deeply and amplify these voices without overshadowing them. So my latest book, it's called Dakini, again a mythological entity. You mentioned Kali some a few moments ago. This is inspired by Kali. So Dakini, I've explored a character, a male character. It's one of the cops in the story who starts off as a man steeped in, the conservative traditions of, somebody who worships Durga, but he fails to understand. He has a lot of reverence for the goddess, but does not understand the real struggles and emotions of the women all around him. So his journey is significant because he transitions from, because that's his transformation from being a product of this patriarchal conditioning to becoming part of the protagonist fight. Protagonist was a woman without trying to dominate or patronize her. So I think that's the role male characters should play if it's a female oriented film. But again, every writer has their own styles. So yeah, that's how it is.
Yeah, right. Ms. Devdhar, you have already shared, an example from one of your cases. As a corporate litigation lawyer, I'm sure you have seen the legal and societal barriers that women often face. What I would like to know is how do you think female rage can translate into a more effective drive for legal and corporate reforms, and where have you seen it already making a tangible impact?
Thank you for the question, Sourabhi. I'll just make a clarification. The Sippy Sidhu case isn't exactly mine, it's just a very popular case. So I made a mention of it. I'm comparatively a young lawyer, so I'm yet to make all of these, be a part of these big cases. Touch wood, let's see. So, as a lawyer, now I have some experience in corporate litigation and also the backside of the courtrooms. I can tell you that there is a massive disconnect in what we are taught at law schools vis-a-vis what we see in the practical working of the courtrooms, and more importantly, what we hear in the bar rooms. I witnessed firsthand that the general perception of how cases of rape, domestic violence, and dowry are spoken of in monetary terms for settlement from the first instance. There is a there's not much that is thought of when it comes to the suffering of the victims or how wrong this act is. When the case comes, they're like, okay, itne ka hoga, this case will be settled for so much. That is the amount. Let's like bargain. It's seen as a bargain, and I think that is where the insensitivity stems in. There is still a lot of gender based discrimination in hiring and promotions. There is a lot of sexualization of female junior lawyers. There's rampant harassment in the workplace. And I'll tell you what's frightening. It is that the very people who speak against these aspects as societal evils, they will come in, lecturate programs, and they will come in bar election speeches. They will say that, this is so wrong and we should like stop it. And, they'll campaign against these things. These are the very same people who would be committing these crimes in their office spaces or, behind closed doors or around their group of people around whom they're comfortable in. And thereafter, they'll boast of how they are, scot free. They'll boast of these episodes while playing golf at clubs, that how the law cannot touch them, how influential they are. So this is where I feel that if women collect themselves, if our male allies, as Hari Kumar sir pointed out, if we all come together, if we channel it effectively, it can be a very powerful tool for driving legal and corporate reforms. It's not like there have not been any reforms. Um, Courts have become much safer in time. Public places, workplaces have become much safer in time. It was because women were united in their anger that we saw justice for Jessica Lal, as well as the bringing in of the Criminal Law Act in 2013, the Nirbhaya Amendment that we call it, which was in response to the public outrage and the demand for stronger laws to protect women. Now, luckily, we are also All of these other crimes, such as voyeurism and acid attacks, stalking, have also been recognized properly after a very very long time. There's harsher penalties for them, and now non-penetrative sexual acts are also recognized as rapes. There is still a lot of work to be done. There's no doubt about that. There is work for men to be recognized as rape victims. That will happen with time. I hope it happens sooner, but there have some work has been done. Further, we can also talk of examples where female collective action has been brought in. It has been brought in through the Equal Remuneration Act or the POSH Act, which is basically prevention of sexual harassment of women at workplace. All of these acts. So we have all the laws and the provisions in place. The problem is, how do people utilize it? How do people really go about it? I want to also bring in this ground that is often raised, that laws are highly biased towards women. They say, I think recently there was also an unfortunate incident where somebody committed suicide, saying that there's a lot of bias towards women, and how the law favors women irrationally. But and also this entire plea that not all men, this narrative of law being favored in women has received much air, and it has become a very repetitive cycle. But this entire debate on feminine rage is not a means to punish men in general. We are not against men, as Hari sir pointed out. It is a debate against patriarchy, of which men are also praise of. Men are also victims to patriarchy. There was much hue and cry when women have already been misusing law so much that when the marital rape, talks of marital rape being criminalized was given, it was said that it is another trigger for women to shoot men with. To all of these concerns, my answer from my understanding of law, whatever I have learned, is that the work of law and the statute is to cover as many spots that can cause a deterrence to the functionality of a society, of which women are an integral part. We can hold law to blame where it is dismissive of a certain aspect, where it is not recognizing a crime as a crime. So let the crime first be recognized. If marital rape is a crime, let it be recognized as a crime so that the victims of marital rape have their reprieve, they have their justice, and thereafter you trust the law and the judiciary enough that it will come up with all of these tests and guidelines to ensure that the manipulative people, the people who are maneuvering the law to blackmail people, that manipulation can be taken away. It can be teared apart. This can only be done when we as a society, just like Asmi ma'am said, that she spoke up in the bus and nobody spoke up for her. If there was even one voice in that bus that day that would have said that this is wrong and get this man off of the bus, it would have made a change and set an example for the entire bus. So it is our responsibility as a society. If you are educated enough, if you have learned about things, please speak up. Only then can law also, you can get the complete benefit of law. Otherwise, if you are quiet if you were one of the people who were quiet in the bus, later you cannot come and say that law is not functioning well and it favors people irrationally.
Right. Um, to Professor Basu, you have already spoken about the expectations that women's roles carry, such as the ideas that women needs to be nurturing. How would you say that this contributes to the suppression of female rage, and how can we challenge this limiting stereotype?
Okay. Um, I um, am a motherhood studies scholar as well. So I will use the motherhood lens here, okay, which is a very interesting lens. And there's a lot of writing at this point that is regarding what Mina Dubbin calls the mom rage. Okay, so there is the entire notion of what it is to be the ideal woman, and we all know it. And the good girl, the nice girl, the sweet girl, etc., etc., all of this, there's a very inherent passivity that goes into the making of a girl. She is sweet, nice, kind, talks softly, laughs softly, tenderly, etc., etc. Now, the same is not meant for boys, of course, and there is a lot more virility, a lot more, um, you know, uh, activity and strength and toughness and all of that, which goes into the making of the right kind of man, etc. As I have said earlier. Now, if I just make it a little more specific, mothers have this very, very stereotypical image. What a mother is. A mother is primarily loving, she is sweet and nurturing, and all the feminine, attributes that we were listening to, we were all talking about in the patriarchal binary thought. All the attributes come to a head with mothers. Now you're a mother. Now you've reached the pinnacle of your life. You've been fulfilled and you're enriched, and the selfless person that you were meant to be all of these while you've been trained to be that. Now is the time that you execute that selflessness. Okay, you be that nurturer, and you just fulfill yourself as a woman, fulfill yourself as a mother, etc. But this is not what mothers actually feel. Mothers are angry. And all the around 70, 80 women who I have spoken face to face have said that, oh my God, there are times when I feel angry on my child. But it is so uh, a point of judgment, a negative judgment, that I don't dare, talk about it. And no one asked me also. This was a very common refrain. I mean, no one asked me. No one asked me. I did not feel that, okay, the moment I held my child in my arms, there was this magical transformation. No, my stitches were hurting. I was not feeling the best feeling in the world. There are times my toddler is driving me crazy. I have not showered in 3 days and I am angry. I have not taken a bite of the food since morning, and I cannot calm this tiny toddler down, and there is no manual that is coming with it. And there is no one who I can say this to. Family members expect me to know everything about my child because I'm a mother. It's like something that should be genetically engineered, within me because I'm a woman, because I have pushed a child out of my body, etc., etc. And what I've realized is that, when you say that you can be this as a woman, you can be this as a mother, you can be this as a man, you can be this as a girl, you constantly limit a person's being, you limit a person's existence, you limit a person's possibilities. Whenever that person's even dares, to step out of that particular given structure, everybody will censor her or him. She or he, herself or himself, will censor himself or herself. That is how this entire program is working so well. It's not only that another woman will say that, oh my God, she's such a terrible mother, she's shouting at her kid. She herself will be like, oh my God, I'm such a terrible mother, to be angry at this tiny little cherub. I mean, that tiny little cherub can be very monstrous and cruel. Children can be cruel. But oh my God, we dare not say any of these things because this is not in the motherhood mandate. This doesn't come under, the holy grail of motherhood and all the glory that is associated to it. And another thing, I'm just adding, just elongating my thing. Just give me 2 seconds. Is it okay, Sourabhi? Is it
Sure, sure, sure.
okay? So it's just what I've also seen is that the anger thing, this has a lot of different shades when we have women in different, social, economic locations. For example, when I am angry, three people might listen to it. If the person who cooks in my house, if she is angry, I don't know if she has a space to express it. We are talking about intersectionality all of the times, and we have this really nice, very simplistic way of saying, oh, you are experiencing X times of problems. The Dalit woman, or the poor woman, the colored woman, she is just experiencing 3x amount of problems. That is not the way. She and I are not comparable. She is, I don't know what kind of problems she is going through just because she's of a lower caste or she is of a certain economic background, or she belongs to a certain religious community, or she's doing a certain kind of job. I, on the other hand, have my own set of problems, my own set of space, but at least I have a space to rage. This woman might not even have that. So intersectionality is not that x into x into x. It's not like that. Intersectionality is understanding that because a woman finds herself in a certain position, because of her intersecting identities, she's her anger is got no place. Her anger is plainly dismissed. And this is how the rage can never become constructive, because the rage is not allowed to take any better shape than, just fuming inside of her. So yeah, with that I would just like to pass it over.
Right. Moving on to Mr. Kumar. Rage-driven paranormal women are often depicted as terrifying, but also as symbols of liberation throughout literature. The burning of witches is historically seen as the consequences of defiant women as well. So, how do you think that the fear they evoke can be channeled into constructive narratives that challenge traditional gender norms and inspire social reform?
Before I answer that question, let me just add something to what Asmi mentioned. I think when you spoke about babies and how difficult they can be, when a husband or a partner is equally involved in raising the child, he or she will understand that. But most of the time, at least in a middle class or your conservative households, women are expected to take care because they're expected to be mothers. So again, it's very you can't just these are very broad categories, right? Things differ when you go from caste to caste, urban to rural areas. So like in the rural areas, even the upper caste, the women who do not go to work, they're expected to live and work in the house. They're expected to live like maids, but not in every households, right? It depends. So again, yeah, what you said is right. It comes from that patriarchal binary thought process. The gender role is, it's defined. Man has to go to work, so he doesn't have time to look after the kid. Woman has to stay back at home, so she has all the time, so she has to understand, she has to whatever it is. So there's nothing but, I'm just agreeing with what you said. But if the partner, be it a man or a woman, if they are equally involved in raising the child, especially in an urban setup, then yes, I think both of them will go through the same motions, and maybe the rage gets divided. And I don't know, I mean, it might be a better way to raise a child. I don't have any experience in that. So anyway, coming back to the question, yeah. If you look at our mythologies, I think Rhea is the one who mentioned how you have Kali, you've got Draupadi, and I not only write horror, I also write folklore and mythology as well. So I think Durga and Kali are perfect examples of, here again, this might be disrespectful to people who follow these goddesses, but let me use the term supernatural women here, because that's what you mentioned in the question. It's either supernatural, paranormal. So Kali and Durga both are supernatural women, right? They've got extreme power. Okay, and now you mentioned the historical burning of witches. Okay, that happened in Europe. Let's come to India. It's still happening. Women are being labeled as witches, but now I'm not talking about your urban setups. I'm talking about your villages in Odisha, your villages in Jharkhand, Rajasthan. Uh, the word Dayan, I'm sorry, I'm going to use Hindi here. Asmi use Bengali. When a new bride, when she comes to the house, the mother-in-law would typically say, "ये तो Dayan hai." Right? What is a Dayan? Dayan is a witch. Okay, but where does the word Dayan come from? It comes from Dakini, but Dakini is not a witch. She has been reduced to a point where she is just a witch. So I think that's how society has reacted to strong women. Because Dakinis, if you go back to Buddhist mythology, they are free women who can, who are called skywalkers. Walkers. Even if you go to the Puranas, they are still attendants of the goddess. So they are almost like the goddesses, right? So somewhere I think, and even there's an example from my, I come from the southern part of the country, even in Kerala, which is supposed to be the most, I mean, one of the most progressive states. If you go back to to our folklore, you'll find the concept of yakshis. Yakshis, what are yakshis? Yakshis are derived from the term yakshinis. Yakshinis and yakshas are celestial beings, nature spirits. Okay. But what has folklore reduced them to? Yakshis are just, white sari wearing vampires who suck blood of men who travel in the night. So that's what, I mean, that's how, uh, folklore, which is folklores have reduced them to that. Although mythology, disagrees with such corruptions, and horror, it's defined by fear, and fear demands, attention. And like there's this beautiful dialogue in the recent Batman movie: fear is a tool. So this tool, it unsettles and disrupts, making space for reflection. So when we portray rage-driven paranormal women, we're not just scaring the audience, we are making them question why these women are angry in the first place, which is not usually, spoken about. When you talk about folklore, when you talk about Yakshi stories, because I grew up listening to stories of Yakshi from my grandmother. Okay. But she never spoke why she became a Yakshi. She always told me that you should not go there because it's haunted by a Yakshi who will drink your blood. So as I grew up, I started realizing that most of these Yakshi stories, I mean, so I don't know if you're getting the context here, but the most of the yakshis, they are women who have been wronged, who were impregnated outside the marriage. Maybe they are dasi girls who are pregnant, who are impregnated by men from the upper caste or whatever it is. So these are the stories, and in northern Kerala, these yakshis are actually venerated. Why? Because they are afraid of the rage which might fall on them if she is not venerated. So yeah, I mean, in a way, by reimagining these paranormal women as agents of liberation, we not only reclaim their stories but also provide a blueprint for challenging these gender norms which Asmi was talking about. I mean, she was not talking directly about it, but whatever she talked about stems from these gender norms that has been set. So yeah, their rage becomes a rallying cry. Jai Bhavani. Rhea spoke about it, right? There is also other chants as well, but let's stick to Jai Bhavani. It's a rallying cry, it's a demand for justice, and an emblem for the change that we need in society. And it's not going to happen anytime soon. Sorry for being so pessimistic, but it's going to take a lot of time.
Right. Moving on to Ms. Devdar. In some movements, anger can become divisive. How can we ensure that female rage brings women together rather than creating fractures within communities or movements?
Well, it is no secret that there is a recurring trend in any movement, be it the Black movement, be it even our Indian freedom struggle. There were always certain categories of people who were dismissed or not taken that seriously, or their demands were sort of not taken up in the mainstream debate, because of which they would feel resentful and they would leave, and eventually you would lose track of the entire struggle, and it would just lead to digression. So um, where a certain debate dies down due to digression of what was to be demanded, the debate, it twirls to a dimension of the collective versus the individual. So when it comes to women's debates, or debates inspired by female rage, be it the suffragette movement back then, we see that even during the second wave of feminism, I think that was in the 1960s to 1980s, there was this huge issue of lesbianism versus trans women, and also related to sexuality, that certain women, they wanted certain liberalization sexually, whereas there was a certain other women who said that any act of sex is more or less an act of rape. So I think the best way to knit women together, the movement together, is that recognizing every person's right, is that they should have a right to choice. They should have a freedom to choose, and we should accept everyone's choice and expression as it is, instead of marking it with terms like, if this woman is holding herself back for marriage, she's backward, or if she's going out with people, she's loose. Let's just let people be how they want to be. Let's recognize trans people the way they would want to be. Only in that term would we understand the other person's perspective. Now, we are also saying that, there are, as I mentioned earlier, there are no provisions for trans women or for men or animals being seen as rape victims. So I think when it comes to all of these sufferings, female rage is very powerful because it recognizes the power to feel other sufferings. There's a lot of aspect of empathy involved in female rage. So you can't empathize with another unless you have an inkling of what the repercussions of pain are. So let's recall that even a struggle for independence got its biggest momentum when women from all households joined in. We, as a society, women and their male allies, we can all bring each other together in their goals by acknowledging and validating every section's individual experiences. So let's just hold a space wherein we recognize that anger can stem from different sources. It can be due to systematic oppression, personal trauma, witnessing injustice, and then we can further emphasize the shared experiences of oppression and discrimination faced by women. Only if we share a ground can we foster a sense of solidarity. Let's like hold space for people to be heard. Women's role might often be constricted to that of a nurturer and provider, as Asmi ma'am had narrated. But there's also recognition that as of now, it is a reality for a majority of not just Indian women, but women worldwide, even internationally. There are so many single mothers and mothers around the globe whose efforts in child rearing are not recognized. Um, but only if women can collaborate can we have a greater recognition for, say, maternity leave or for other, reprieves such as creches or spaces for women so that they can rear people collectively. Only then, I think, if we understand each other's pain, if we hold a certain sense of care for the other, can we, have this sense of solidarity. That is my take on it. That is how we can go about it.
Right. Moving on to Professor Basu. Initially, in the beginning, you had mentioned about your rage making you want productive. So I would like to, mention that female rage is often seen as reactive and not, so I like to ask that whether it can be productive as well. And what are some ways in which women can use anger to envision and create the future they want to see rather than simply reacting to current issues? Ma'am, you're on mute.
I always do this even when I'm taking online classes. So sorry. There are so many scholars and writers who have looked at productive anger. Okay, they have spoken about transforming anger into something that might actually um, create a space from where we we could go forward into a more egalitarian setup, etc. Now, see, rage is reactive. Okay, rage primarily you are reacting to a situation. It might be a pent up something, it might be very instinctive and incidental, but it is reactive. Now, rage at its peak, when you're very, very volatile, you're hot and fuming inside your head, it is difficult to immediately address it in a very constructive manner. But what I feel is there's something called the basements of a person. For example, if if a woman is, you know, extremely angry and bursting out and, shouting about something, it may be that two, three, four, five, six things have happened earlier that day, earlier that month, earlier that week, earlier that year, and it has been constantly been heaping one on top of the other. It is very important, I feel, that when that woman herself is beyond that particular rage episode. She or he or anyone is taking the time to travel back to those basements. That, I reacted in this particular way, and I can be judged, and it can be a terrible source of guilt for me. But why did it happen? Because if we go into thinking about the roots of the rage, only then can we actually think of something that will be more proactive. Let's create something. Let's try to make something so that this rage isn't just a reaction. Maybe we can make something more potent, more constructive, so that the reason for this rage, it can be dealt with. I'll give you an example here. What happens is, there is this wonderful woman called Martha Nussbaum, who's talking constantly about Hannah Arendt, who's another scholar. Her concept of understanding. So, understanding, as per Hannah Arendt, is the only human way to live. We live by understanding. We understand from our childhood, we understand the norms, the ideas, the notions, the particular religion we are born into, our community. We constantly learn and we try to understand. And this is something that doesn't happen from the vacuum. I mean, I'm a person, and how I see the world, my perspectives, that doesn't just come from a single book. It comes through interpersonal relationships. Okay. So I interact and I learn. I look at situations and I understand. When this understanding happens and our minds are developed, our minds are formed, we do not only gather a certain socialization or internalized norms of a community or a way of life. What we also do is, through our interactions, we are giving back to this particular body of knowledge. We learn, and then through interactions, we also give back. So when we learn all the biases. When we give back, we again give back the biases. This is how the biases run. A very relevant example would be, when we were young, our parents, mostly in many households, the mothers would say that you are not allowed to do a number of things when you are on your periods. When you're menstruating, you do not touch the dairy, you do not go into the worship room, you don't do this, you don't do that, etc. etc. Now, there are so many women my age who are becoming mothers. And just a few days back, I heard one of my friends saying something very, very similar to a niece. She has taken all that knowledge, now she's giving back to it. And constantly, the practice, the certain norms, the superstitions, the misinformation, it gets consolidated. Now, when we are talking about rage, and we are talking about, you know, um, how to deal with it and how to make it more productive, this is very important that we should not label rage in the ways, in the terms that it is usually labeled as. Oh, she is completely unstable and therefore she is raging and shouting and is at her wit's end. Well, she is not a very good householder. She is not a very good mother. She's not a very good wife. She's not a very good manager, and therefore, let us go back and let us just go into the basements of that person's mind and at least give her the space for her to excavate what is the root. For us to have, I would use Rhea's wonderful word, empathy. Some empathy to put ourselves in that person's shoes. Oh, this woman, maybe, she's just not, let's not label her as a PMS monster. Let's just, take two steps back and think. Maybe she has been rejected from a job because she's pregnant. And the employer is thinking, oh my God, what is the point taking her? Maybe she is just as educated as her husband and just as fit for a certain industry, but she will get a certain wage because she's a woman. Maybe she is, thanks to patri locality, she has left her, house and table and familiar way of life and has married into a family where she's finding it very hard to adjust. We don't know what's happening. We don't know. We just see the manifestation of rage. That's it. And we do not take it any further. Rather, we would, brush it under the carpet. Rather, we would say, oh my God, take three deep breaths. Oh, I hate that sentence. What do you mean by take three deep breaths? What happens in those three breaths? Nothing. It's like, we are constantly saying that if you just take three deep breaths, a systemic injustice that is reserved for a woman, that just goes away. You just go back into the poised self. And that's how you just, if you ignore something, it just goes away. Oh, it doesn't. If you have cancer and you do not treat it, it doesn't go away anywhere. It just kills you eventually. So it's so important that we understand the root of the rage. If understanding is a human way of survival, as Hannah Arendt says, then we must understand, create that space, that empathy, that willingness in ourselves. That, okay, this person is behaving in this particular way, is raging like this, and maybe there are more reasons to it than what I can imagine. If we do not challenge the normative discourse that is there about female rage, if we just have this webinar and go back home and then, judge another woman shouting, nothing is going to change. It's always going to be reactive and never proactive. It's not going to change if we just go on sticking to the kind of ideas and stereotypes that we have been fed for so long. Ask yourself, ask the other person, what is it? Why are you so angry? And you will find that the person, when whatever it is that she is reacting to, her anger has got nothing to do with it. The anger is something that is coming out because of certain five other different pent up things, pent up reasons. It's important to address those reasons, to know what the anger is constructed of. I feel that is what I feel. I,
All right. Moving on to Mr. Kumar, horror and folklore as a genre has is being sold off like hotcakes at the moment. So, with the influx of in these genres, how do you believe, or do you believe that there is a risk of misinterpreting or diluting the essence of female rage in fiction?
I disagree with you. I don't think it's. I mean, it's not selling like hotcakes. There's hardly. If you look at films, there's just two films last year that was maybe in the last 2 years that actually were from the genre, and they were big hits. Yes, but there were I think 10 or 15 others that didn't even do well. And compare it with films or even books, of other genre, the ratio is very less. So let's not assume that horror or folklore, these are doing well. Okay, it's nowhere near. Anyway, regardless of whether the genre is doing well or not, the thing is, um, there is a risk of misrepresenting or diluting the essence of female rage in, at least in popular fiction. When I'm talking about commercial fiction, whether like I write commercial fiction, my books are commercial, are not literary fiction, they are commercial fiction. If you look at films, there you got your commercial films. Okay, so in commercial film, say for examples, three is a film which set some kind of a benchmark. And now, if you look at all the films in the genre, it's kind of trying to imitate the same thing. And in fact, there was a recent one, I won't even name the film. Uh, it made a mockery of Bengalis, at least that's what I felt. But that's a big budget, big movie, made 100 crores, but that movie is doing the same thing, misrepresentation. And that's what happens when the genre expands. There's a tendency for certain themes like female rage, homosexuality. These just get reduced to marketable tropes, and overused cliches. And When one film or a book, like I mentioned, Three or a Bhul Bhulaiya Part One, it becomes a hit, then everyone starts just imitating and overusing it. And the thing is, when female rage, something as sensitive as female rage, gets depicted without context or nuance, it becomes a hollow spectacle rather than an integral part of a story's emotional or thematic or the character's arc, as I mentioned in the beginning. So I think ultimately it's the responsibility of writers, filmmakers, producers, and other creators to treat these issues with the respect and complexity it demands. I think that's the only way we should go forward, rather than falling for this commercial aspects, which ultimately drives the industry. Otherwise, or people like me will starve, sadly. Yeah.
Right. To Ms. Devdhar, many women are still hesitant to express their rage openly. What advice would you give to young women who feel overwhelmed by their anger but want to channel it into meaningful advice and advocacy for change?
Thank you for this question, Sourabhi. Now that I think of it, when I think of expressing rage, and as Asmi also pointed out, when if we go back from here and we judge another woman for like shouting, then that is totally on us. But unfortunately, right now, I have also often expressed my anger publicly, and the results haven't really been very, productive. I haven't really had my answers, my dilemmas answered, because then your image is more vulnerable to you're being called unstable or having a mental ailment assigned to you. um it's extremely true. There's also, I'll one more case I'll mention if everyone agrees with it. Yeah, yeah.
Sure, sure.
So there was there was this case on R versus Ahluwalia. It was a very sensational case. It happened in England. A rustic woman, she got married to an NRI, and then she went to England, where her husband would frequently, she started to live a life full of marital woes, basically, instead of bliss. Her husband would frequently beat her, abuse her at all the time. He was a huge philanderer also. So there was a lot of prolonged domestic violence. One day she was like, she has had enough. She got two oil canisters and burnt him alive. Thereafter, her case was tried, and the biggest, question between the point of law that the court was deciding was whether she should be punished for homicide, which is a lesser punishment, or murder, where there is a greater aspect of intention. The only difference she could have taken was of provocation. On this, Aishwarya Rai's movie Provoked has also been made. It's the same name, yeah. So that movie. So for provocation, you need two things. One is that your emotion should be very strong, extremely passionate, like a lot of enragement, anger, sudden, enragement. And secondly, yes, of course, it should be sudden. It should be instantaneous. In her case, the first aspect was proven very easily, that yes, she had a lot of rage because of so many years of suffering. But the second aspect of it being instantaneous was in question, because she had pre planned it. So, of course, it was not instantaneous. However, long story short, the court, it recognized the years of domestic violence, and thereafter they said that okay, because she suffered so much of domestic violence, let's diminish her punishment. It would her crime. She was convicted for manslaughter on account of diminished responsibility, because of which she was acquitted sooner than people who are who get punished for murder. So people celebrated this all over the world. There were feminist literature, a lot of literati was celebrated that okay, domestic violence has been internationally recognized. It's such a wonderful thing. However, there was this one scholar who pointed out very, very correctly that it is not domestic violence and her suffering, the woman's suffering or her rage, that is being recognized. Rather, what they are recognizing is that that woman has now, developed a mental ailment on account of the years of misery, because of which, Asmiji, now this would, relate to you, that this now relates to lunacy, or a syndrome called, they coined a syndrome specifically for it called the battered wife syndrome. So, because she has developed the battered wife syndrome on account of lunacy, her account was reduced. This is what happens when you publicly or openly express rage. Even as a criminal, you would, have a mental ailment assigned to you, leave alone a social setting. So, I think when it comes to rage, what I'd like to say that if you are the party that is enraged, let's try to understand the emotion. Like Hari sir said, fear is a tool, or like Asmi ma'am said that my rage is, a power or something that helps me out. Rage as an emotion, I think it tells you where it is basically anger, which is suppressed for a long time. And what is anger? It is basically when a boundary of yours has been transgressed, when an injustice has been done to you. So when you understand that there is some injustice, I think when the first bit of anger comes in, please recognize it then and there, that there is something that is not going correctly. So I think anger is something that also tells you that you do love yourself and you do see yourself as worthy enough to not have injustice being done to you often. Rage is just an animate form of anger. So when you don't express it early on, that this is something that is disturbing me, or this is something that makes me feel very uncomfortable, it is only then that it would build up to a point where you will have an angry outburst. So my suggestion would be to mention it earlier. And also, if you are the party which is around the enraged person, around a woman who is enraged, I'll give you an example. I had an altercation with a very close friend of mine, and I said some things which I shouldn't have, and later, of course, I apologized. And I told my friend that, I had such an angry outburst. If I have it with other people, they would judge me and they would say certain things to me. But in your case, you didn't say that. So he said that that's because, I care for you enough to, go behind what was causing the anger. What caused you to be angry? I cared about you enough. I wanted to understand. I understood that there is something you want to say. So as we said that there should be empathy, there should be an understanding of things. I think we get back to the same circle that you have to understand the other person, and only then can a change be created in the society altogether. So these are my answers for the angry party and for the party around the angry people.
Right. My last question is for Professor Basu. You already mentioned intersectionality and that anger is experienced differently across culture, social, and economic lines. I would like to know a little more that how do you think intersectionality influences the way female rage is expressed and received, and how can we ensure these diverse voices are amplified?
Okay. So, there are many people who have been speaking about intersectionality. We have, it's not just Croshaw, who's of course who started the entire, who kind of was extremely potently talking about it, etc., etc. In case of, I think the colored woman issue and the Black Lives, etc. So, um, I came across this particular understanding of intersectionality as Mary E. John, who's a very prominent women studies scholar who was talking about intersectionality, and she said that you know uh, the way our contexts are built. I'm a woman. I am in this particular caste. I'm this particular class. I'm in this particular community. I'm in this particular geographical location. This is my marital status. This is my educational qualification. This is the kind of familial status I have, etc., etc. This constitutes a certain kind of experience which is unique to my position. And if there is someone who is, say, in a more deprived position, it's not only that that person is suffering more, the point of focus should be that that person is suffering very differently. And Mary John says it, she said, qualitatively different experience. Okay. So, intersectionality, when we are talking about it, we must count the concept of difference in. That is the first thing. The second thing is there is this particular notion of, effective economies that Sarah Ahmed talks about, and she says that we look at people, or we understand people and we understand their identities, at least what they put forward, with certain, nothing is in the vacuum, with certain uh, biases of our own, with certain notions of our own. And she says, I will just talk about her effective economies concept, where she says that emotions are influenced by social contexts, race, class, sexuality. Emotions are not neutral, which I found very interesting. And she says that for women from different backgrounds, say different economies, different classes, different castes, different geographical locations, how they express their feelings, how they express their rage in this particular context, their responses are shaped by their intersectional identities. That is, counting in all the differences. And what I have seen and what I have felt in my study of intersectionality and rage is that there are women whose rage and any kind of emotional expression will be simply blatantly devalued because they belong to a certain, you know, socio-economic location. Okay. And say for example, this is this vicious cycle. Say a man, his rage has a certain value. I'm a woman, my rage is dealt with very, very differently. Now, I have a certain educational status, a certain economic status, a certain social status. Then the woman who is sweeping the floors of my house, her rage is again maybe dismissed, maybe not heard, maybe made fun of, etc. etc. So, where a person comes from has a very, very important impact on the rage of that person. And specifically for women, I do not know uh, of a lot of women who belong to certain castes and socioeconomic classes whose rages are often heard. They don't even feel that they have a space to rage. They feel that they were born to swallow it up because they are who they are in their particular location in the society. And after very, very long periods of time, these women become exactly what a hierarchical social structure wants them to be. A, muted, extremely muted, and secondly, completely misrepresented. This is where the rage has gone wrong. This is where the rage has solidified into nothing but something which is completely reactionary. It's been simplified, and the potential of the rage is wasted. This is because we are so blind to the intersectional details that are very much functional. When we look at something more intersectionally, when we are a lot more inclusive about the differences of experiences that make people, only then can we actually react in the right manner to their emotional expressions of any emotion for that matter. That is my take on it. Thank you.
Right. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I thank all the panelists once again for sharing their invaluable perspectives. This is to remind our viewers once again that we are calling for submissions on the project. To please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz for further details. We'll come back to you soon with our next panel discussion. Till then, goodbye and good night.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.